Welcome to Global Bible Reading. The Gospel according to Luke.
Luke 16. Jesus said to his disciples,
"A rich man once had a manager to take care of his business. But he was told that his manager was wasting money. So the rich man called him in and said, 'What is this I hear about you? Tell me what you have done. You are no longer going to work for me.' The manager said to himself, 'What shall I do now that my master is going to fire me? I can't dig ditches, and I'm ashamed to beg. I know what I'll do so that people will welcome me into their homes after I've lost my job.' Then, one by one, he called in the people who were in debt to his master. He asked the first one, 'How much do you owe my master?' 100 barrels of olive oil,' the man answered. So the manager said, 'Take your bill and sit down and quickly write 50. The manager asked someone else who was in debt to his master, 'How much do you owe?' 1,000 bushels of wheat,' the man replied. The manager said, 'Take your bill and write 800. The master praised his dishonest manager for looking out for himself so well. That's how it is. The people of this world look out for themselves better than the people who belong to the light. My disciples, I tell you to use wicked wealth to make friends for yourselves. Then, when it is gone, you will be welcomed into an eternal home. Anyone who can be trusted in little matters can also be trusted in important matters. But anyone who is dishonest in little matters will be dishonest in important matters. If you cannot be trusted with this wicked wealth, who will trust you with true wealth? And if you cannot be trusted with what belongs to someone else, who will give you something that will be your own? You cannot be the slave of two masters. You will like one more than the other, or be more loyal to one than to the other. You cannot serve God and money."
The Pharisees really loved money. So when they heard what Jesus said, they made fun of him. But Jesus told them,
"You are always making yourselves look good, but God sees what is in your heart. The things that most people think are important are worthless as far as God is concerned. Until the time of John the Baptist, people had to obey the law of Moses and the books of the prophets. But since God's kingdom has been preached, everyone is trying hard to get in. Heaven and earth will disappear before the smallest letter of the law does. It is a terrible sin for a man to divorce his wife and marry another woman. It is also a terrible sin for a man to marry a divorced woman. There was once a rich man who wore expensive clothes and every day ate the best food. But a poor beggar named Lazarus was brought to the gate of the rich man's house. He was happy just to eat the scraps that fell from the rich man's table. His body was covered with sores, and dogs kept coming up to lick them. The poor man died, and angels took him to the place of honor next to Abraham. The rich man also died and was buried. He went to hell and was suffering terribly. When he looked up and saw Abraham far off and Lazarus at his side, he said to Abraham, 'Have pity on me. Send Lazarus to dip his finger in water and touch my tongue. I'm suffering terribly in this fire.' Abraham answered, 'My friend, remember that while you lived, you had everything good, and Lazarus had everything bad. Now he is happy and you are in pain. And besides, there is a deep ditch between us, and no one from either side can cross over.' But the rich man said, 'Abraham, then please send Lazarus to my father's home. Let him warn my 5 brothers so they won't come to this horrible place.' Abraham answered, 'Your brothers can read what Moses and the prophets wrote. They should pay attention to that.' Then the rich man said, 'No, that's not enough. If only someone from the dead would go to them, they would listen and turn to God.' So Abraham said, 'If they won't pay attention to Moses and the prophets, they won't listen even to someone who comes back from the dead.'"
Luke 17. Jesus said to his disciples,
There will always be something that causes people to sin. But anyone who causes them to sin is in for trouble. A person who causes even one of my little followers to sin would be better off thrown into the ocean with a heavy stone tied around the neck. So be careful what you do. Correct any followers of mine who sin, and forgive the ones who say they are sorry. Even if one of them mistreats you 7 times in one day and says, "I am sorry," you should still forgive that person.
The apostles said to the Lord,
"Make our faith stronger."
Jesus replied,
If you had faith no bigger than a tiny mustard seed, you could tell this mulberry tree to pull itself up, roots and all, and to plant itself in the ocean, and it would. If your servant comes in from plowing or from taking care of the sheep, would you say, "Welcome, come on in and have something to eat"? No, you wouldn't say that. You would say, "Fix me something to eat. Get ready to serve me so I can have my meal. Then later on, you can eat and drink." Servants don't deserve special thanks for doing what they are supposed to do. And that's how it should be with you. When you've done all you should, then say, "We are merely servants, and we have simply done our duty."
On his way to Jerusalem, Jesus went along the border between Samaria and Galilee. As he was going into a village, 10 men with leprosy came toward him. They stood at a distance and shouted,
Jesus! Master! Have pity on us!
Jesus looked at them and said,
Go, show yourselves to the priests.
On their way, they were healed. When one of them discovered that he was healed, he came back, shouting praises to God. He bowed down at the feet of Jesus and thanked him. The man was from the country of Samaria. Jesus asked,
Weren't 10 men healed? Where are the other 9? Why was this foreigner the only one who came back to thank God?
Then Jesus told the man,
You may get up and go. Your faith has made you well.
Some Pharisees asked Jesus when God's kingdom would come. He answered,
God's kingdom is not something you can see. There is no use saying, Look, here it is, or Look, there it is. God's kingdom is here with you.
Jesus said to his disciples,
The time will come when you will long to see one of the days of the Son of Man, but you will not. When people say to you, Look there, or Look here, don't go looking for him. The day of the Son of Man will be like lightning flashing across the sky. But first, he must suffer terribly and be rejected by the people of today. When the Son of Man comes, things will be just as they were when Noah lived. People were eating, drinking, and getting married right up to the day when Noah went into the big boat. Then the flood came and drowned everyone on earth. When Lot lived, people were also eating and drinking. They were buying, selling, planting, and building. But on the very day Lot left Sodom, fiery flames poured down from the sky and killed everyone. The same will happen on the day when the Son of Man appears. At that time, no one on a rooftop should go down into the house to get anything. No one in a field should go back to the house for anything. Remember what happened to Lot's wife. People who try to save their lives will lose them, and those who lose their lives will save them. On that night, 2 people will be sleeping in the same bed, but only one will be taken. The other will be left. 2 women will be together grinding wheat, but only one will be taken. The other will be left.
Then Jesus' disciples spoke up.
But where will this happen, Lord?
Jesus said,
Where there is a corpse, there will always be buzzards.
Luke 18. Jesus told his disciples a story about how they should keep on praying and never give up.
In a town, there was once a judge who didn't fear God or care about people. In that same town, there was a widow who kept going to the judge and saying, Make sure that I get fair treatment in court. For a while, the judge refused to do anything. Finally, he said to himself, Even though I don't fear God or care about people, I will help this widow because she keeps on bothering me. If I don't help her, she will wear me out.
The Lord said,
Think about what that crooked judge said. Won't God protect his chosen ones who pray to him day and night? Won't he be concerned for them? He will surely hurry and help them. But when the Son of Man comes, will he find on this earth anyone with faith?
Jesus told a story to some people who thought they were better than others and who looked down on everyone else.
2 men went into the temple to pray. One was a Pharisee, and the other a tax collector. The Pharisee stood over by himself and prayed, "God, I thank you that I am not greedy, dishonest, and unfaithful in marriage like other people. And I am really glad that I am not like that tax collector over there. I go without eating for 2 days a week, and I give you 1/10 of all I earn." The tax collector stood off at a distance and did not think he was good enough even to look up toward heaven. He was so sorry for what he had done that he pounded his chest and prayed, "God, have pity on me. I am such a sinner."
Then Jesus said,
When the 2 men went home, it was the tax collector and not the Pharisee who was pleasing to God. If you put yourself above others, you will be put down. But if you humble yourself, you will be honored.
Some people brought their little children for Jesus to bless. But when his disciples saw them doing this, they told the people to stop bothering him. So Jesus called the children over to him and said,
Let the children come to me. Don't try to stop them. People who are like these children belong to God's kingdom. You will never get into God's kingdom unless you enter it like a child.
An important man asked Jesus,
Good teacher, what must I do to have eternal life?
Jesus said,
Why do you call me good? Only God is good. You know the commandments. Be faithful in marriage. Do not murder. Do not steal. Do not tell lies about others. Respect your father and mother.
He told Jesus,
I have obeyed all these commandments since I was a young man.
When Jesus heard this, he said,
There is one thing you still need to do. Go and sell everything you own. Give the money to the poor, and you will have riches in heaven. Then come and be my follower.
When the man heard this, he was sad, because he was very rich. Jesus saw how sad the man was, so he said,
It's terribly hard for rich people to get into God's kingdom. In fact, it's easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich person to get into God's kingdom.
When the people heard this, they asked,
How can anyone ever be saved?
Jesus replied,
There are some things that people cannot do, but God can do anything.
Peter said,
Remember, we left everything to be your followers.
Jesus answered,
You can be sure that anyone who gives up home or wife or brothers or family or children because of God's kingdom will be given much more in this life. And in the future world, they will have eternal life.
Jesus took the 12 apostles aside and said,
We are now on our way to Jerusalem. Everything that the prophets wrote about the Son of Man will happen there. He will be handed over to foreigners who will make fun of him, mistreat him, and spit on him. They will beat him and kill him. But 3 days later, he will rise to life.
The apostles did not understand what Jesus was talking about. They could not understand because the meaning of what he said was hidden from them. When Jesus was coming close to Jericho, a blind man sat begging beside the road. The man heard the crowd walking by and asked what was happening. Some people told him that Jesus from Nazareth was passing by. So the blind man shouted,
Jesus, Son of David, have pity on me.
The people who were going along with Jesus told the man to be quiet, but he shouted even louder,
Son of David, have pity on me.
Jesus stopped and told some people to bring the blind man over to him. When the blind man was getting near, Jesus asked,
What do you want me to do for you?
Lord, I want to see.
He answered. Jesus replied,
Look, and you will see. Your eyes are healed because of your faith.
Right away the man could see, and he went with Jesus and started thanking God. When the crowd saw what happened, they praised God. Luke 19. Jesus was going through Jericho, where a man named Zacchaeus lived. He was in charge of collecting taxes and was very rich. Jesus was heading his way, and Zacchaeus wanted to see what he was like. But Zacchaeus was a short man and could not see over the crowd. So he ran ahead and climbed up into a sycamore tree. When Jesus got there, he looked up and said,
"Zacchaeus, hurry down. I want to stay with you today."
Zacchaeus hurried down and gladly welcomed Jesus. Everyone who saw this started grumbling.
This man Zacchaeus is a sinner, and Jesus is going home to eat with him?
Later that day, Zacchaeus stood up and said to the Lord,
I will give half of my property to the poor, and I will now pay back 4 times as much to everyone I have ever cheated.
Jesus said to Zacchaeus,
"Today, you and your family have been saved because you are a true son of Abraham. The Son of Man came to look for and to save people who are lost."
The people were still listening to Jesus as he was getting close to Jerusalem. Many of them thought that God's kingdom would soon appear, and Jesus told them this story.
A prince once went to a foreign country to be crowned king and then to return. But before leaving, he called in 10 servants and gave each of them some money. He told them, "Use this to earn more money until I get back." But the people of his country hated him, and they sent messengers to the foreign country to say, "We don't want this man to be our king." After the prince had been made king, he returned and called in his servants. He asked them how much they had earned with the money they had been given. The first servant came and said, "Sir, with the money you gave me, I have earned 10 times as much." "That's fine, my good servant," the king said. "Since you have shown that you can be trusted with a small amount, you will be given 10 cities to rule." The second one came and said, "Sir, with the money you gave me, I have earned 5 times as much." The king said, "You will be given 5 cities." Another servant came and said, "Sir, here is your money. I kept it safe in a handkerchief. You are a hard man, and I was afraid of you. You take what is not yours, and you harvest crops you didn't plant." "You worthless servant," the king told him. "You have condemned yourself by what you have just said. You knew that I am a hard man, taking what is not mine and harvesting what I've not planted. Why didn't you put my money in the bank? On my return, I could have had the money together with interest." Then he said to some other servants standing there, "Take the money away from him and give it to the servant who earned 10 times as much." But they said, "Sir, he already has 10 times as much." The king replied, "Those who have something will be given more, but everything will be taken away from those who don't have anything. Now bring me the enemies who didn't want me to be their king. Kill them while I watch."
When Jesus had finished saying all this, he went on toward Jerusalem. As he was getting near to Bethphage and Bethany in the Mount of Olives, he sent 2 of his disciples on ahead. He told them,
"Go into the next village, where you will find a young donkey that has never been ridden. Untie the donkey and bring it here. If anyone asks, 'Why are you doing that?' just say, 'The Lord needs it.'"
They went off and found everything just as Jesus had said. While they were untying the donkey, its owners asked,
"Why are you doing that?"
They answered,
"The Lord needs it."
Then they led the donkey to Jesus. They put some of their clothes on its back and helped Jesus get on. And as he rode along, the people spread clothes on the road in front of him. When Jesus was starting down the Mount of Olives, his large crowd of disciples were happy and praised God because of all the miracles they had seen. They shouted,
Blessed is the King who comes in the name of the Lord. Peace in heaven and glory to God.
Some Pharisees in the crowd said to Jesus,
Teacher, make your disciples stop shouting.
but Jesus answered,
"If they keep quiet, these stones will start shouting."
When Jesus came closer and could see Jerusalem, he cried and said,
"It is too bad that today your people don't know what will bring them peace. Now it is hidden from them. Jerusalem, The time will come when your enemies will build walls around you to attack you. Armies will surround you and close in on you from every side. They will level you to the ground and kill your people. Not one stone in your buildings will be left on top of another. This will happen because you did not see that God had come to save you.
When Jesus entered the temple, he started chasing out the people who were selling things. He told them,
"The scriptures say, 'My house should be a place of worship,' but you have made it a place where robbers hide."
Each day Jesus kept on teaching in the temple. So the chief priests, the teachers of the law of Moses, and some other important people tried to have him killed. But they could not find a way to do it because everyone else was eager to listen to him. Luke 20. One day Jesus was teaching in the temple and telling the good news. So the chief priests, the teachers, and the nation's leaders asked him,
"What right do you have to do these things? Who gave you this authority?"
Jesus replied,
I want to ask you a question. Who gave John the right to baptize? Was it God in heaven, or merely some human being?
They talked this over and said to each other,
We can't say that God gave John this right. Jesus will ask us why we didn't believe John. And we can't say that it was merely some human who gave John the right to baptize. The crowd will stone us to death because they think John was a prophet.
So they told Jesus.
We don't know who gave John the right to baptize.
Jesus replied,
Then I won't tell you who gave me the right to do what I do.
Jesus told the people this story.
A man once planted a vineyard and rented it out. Then he left the country for a long time. When it was time to harvest the crop, he sent a servant to ask the renters for his share of the grapes. But they beat up the servant and sent him away without anything. So the owner sent another servant. The renters also beat him up. They insulted him terribly and sent him away without a thing. The owner sent a third servant. He was also beaten terribly and thrown out of the vineyard. The owner then said to himself, What am I going to do? I know what. I'll send my son, the one I love so much. They will surely respect him. When the renters saw the owner's son, they said to one another, Someday he will own the vineyard. Let's kill him, then we can have it all for ourselves. So they threw him out of the vineyard and killed him.
Jesus asked,
What do you think the owner of the vineyard will do? I'll tell you what he will do. He will come and kill those renters and let someone else have his vineyard.
When the people heard this, they said,
This must never happen.
But Jesus looked straight at them and said,
Then what do the scriptures mean when they say, The stone that the builders tossed aside is now the most important stone of all? Anyone who stumbles over this stone will get hurt, and anyone it falls on will be smashed to pieces.
The chief priests and the teachers of the law of Moses knew that Jesus was talking about them when he was telling this story. They wanted to arrest him right then, but they were afraid of the people. Jesus' enemies kept watching him closely because they wanted to hand him over to the Roman governor. So they sent some men who pretended to be good, but they were really spies trying to catch Jesus saying something wrong. The spies said to him,
Teacher, we know that you teach the truths about what God wants people to do, and you treat everyone with the same respect, no matter who they are. Tell us, should we pay taxes to the emperor or not?
Jesus knew that they were trying to trick him, so he told them,
Show me a coin.
Then he asked,
Whose picture and name are on it?
The emperor's.
They answered. Then he told them,
Give the emperor what belongs to him, and give God what belongs to God.
Jesus' enemies could not catch him saying anything wrong there in front of the people. They were amazed at his answer and kept quiet. The Sadducees did not believe that people would rise to life after death, So some of them came to Jesus and said,
Teacher, Moses wrote that if a married man dies and has no children, his brother should marry the widow. Their first son would then be thought of as the son of the dead brother. There were once 7 brothers. The first one married but died without having any children. The second one married his brother's widow, and he also died without having any children. The same thing happened to the third one. Finally, all 7 brothers married that woman and died without having any children. At last, the woman died. When God raises people from death, whose wife will this woman be? All 7 brothers had married her.
Jesus answered,
The people in this world get married, but in the future world, no one who is worthy to rise from death will either marry or die. They will be like the angels and will be God's children because they have been raised to life. In the story about the burning bush, Moses clearly shows that people will live again. He said, The Lord is the God worshipped by Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So the Lord is not the God of the dead, but of the living. This means that everyone is alive as far as God is concerned.
Some of the teachers of the law of Moses said,
Teacher, you have given a good answer.
From then on, no one dared to ask Jesus any questions. Jesus asked,
Why do people say that the Messiah will be the son of King David? In the book of Psalms, David himself says, The Lord said to my Lord, Sit at my right side until I make your enemies into a footstool for you. David spoke of the Messiah as his Lord, so how can the Messiah be his son?
While everyone was listening to Jesus, he said to his disciples,
Guard against the teachers of the law of Moses. They love to walk around in long robes, and they like to be greeted in the market. They want the front seats in the meeting places and the best seats at banquets. But they cheat widows out of their homes, and then pray long prayers just to show off. These teachers will be punished most of all.
Luke 21. Jesus looked up and saw some rich people tossing their gifts into the offering box. He also saw a poor widow putting in 2 pennies, and he said,
I tell you that this poor woman has put in more than all the others. Everyone else gave what they didn't need, but she is very poor and gave everything she had.
Some people were talking about the beautiful stones used to build the temple and about the gifts that had been placed in it. Jesus said,
Do you see these stones? The time is coming when not one of them will be left in place. They will all be knocked down.
Some people asked,
Teacher, when will all this happen? How can we know when these things are about to take place?
Jesus replied,
Don't be fooled by all those who will come and claim to be me. They will say, I am Christ, and now is the time. But don't follow them. When you hear about wars and riots, don't be afraid. These things will have to happen first, but that is not the end. Nations will go to war against one another, and kingdoms will attack each other. There will be great earthquakes, and in many places people will starve to death and suffer terrible diseases. All sorts of frightening things will be seen in the sky. Before all this happens, you will be arrested and punished. You will be tried in the Jewish meeting places and put in jail. Because of me, you will be placed on trial before kings and governors, but this will be your chance to tell about your faith. Don't worry about what you will say to defend yourselves. I will give you the wisdom to know what to say. None of your enemies will be able to oppose you or to say that you are wrong. You will be betrayed by your own parents, brothers, family, and friends. Some of you will even be killed. Because of me, you will be hated by everyone, but don't worry. You will be saved by being faithful to me. When you see Jerusalem surrounded by soldiers, you will know that it will soon be destroyed. If you are living in Judea at the time, run to the mountains. If you are in the city, leave it. And if you are out in the country, don't go back into the city. This time of punishment is what is written about in the scriptures. It will be an awful time for women who are expecting babies or nursing young children. Everywhere in the land, people will suffer horribly and be punished. Some of them will be killed by swords. Others will be carried off to foreign countries. Jerusalem will be overrun by foreign nations until their time comes to an end. Strange things will happen to the sun, moon, and stars. The nations on earth will be afraid of the roaring sea and tides, and they won't know what to do. People will be so frightened that they will faint because of what is happening to the world. Every power in the sky will be shaken. Then the Son of Man will be seen, coming in a cloud with great power and glory. When all of this starts happening, stand up straight and be brave. You will soon be set free.
Then Jesus told them a story.
When you see a fig tree or any other tree putting out leaves, you know that summer will soon come. So, when you see these things happening, you know that God's kingdom will soon be here. You can be sure that some of the people living today will still be alive when all of this takes place. The sky and the earth won't last forever, but my words will. Don't spend all of your time thinking about eating or drinking or worrying about life. If you do, the final day will suddenly catch you like a trap. That day will surprise everyone on earth. Watch out and keep praying that you can escape all that is going to happen, and that the Son of Man will be pleased with you.
Jesus taught in the temple each day, and he spent each night on the Mount of Olives. Everyone got up early and came to the temple to hear him teach. Luke 22. The Feast of Thin Bread, also called Passover, was near. The chief priests and the teachers of the law of Moses were looking for a way to get rid of Jesus, because they were afraid of what the people might do. Then Satan entered the heart of Judas Iscariot, who was one of the 12 apostles. Judas went to talk with the chief priests and the officers of the temple police about how he could help them arrest Jesus. They were very pleased and offered to pay Judas some money. He agreed and started looking for a good chance to betray Jesus when the crowds were not around. The day had come for the Feast of Thin Bread, and it was time to kill the Passover lambs. So Jesus said to Peter and John,
"Go and prepare the Passover meal for us to eat."
But they asked,
Where do you want us to prepare it?
Jesus told them,
"As you go into the city, you will meet a man carrying a jar of water. Follow him into the house and say to the owner, 'Our teacher wants to know where he can eat the Passover meal with his disciples.' The owner will take you upstairs and show you a large room ready for you to use. Prepare the meal there."
Peter and John left. They found everything just as Jesus had told them, and they prepared the Passover meal. When the time came for Jesus and the apostles to eat, he said to them,
"I have very much wanted to eat this Passover meal with you before I suffer. I tell you that I will not eat another Passover meal until it is finally eaten in God's kingdom."
Jesus took a cup of wine in his hands and gave thanks to God. Then he told the apostles,
"Take this wine and share it with each other. I tell you that I will not drink any more wine until God's kingdom comes."
Jesus took some bread in his hands and gave thanks for it. He broke the bread and handed it to his apostles. Then he said,
"This is my body, which is given for you. Eat this as a way of remembering me."
After the meal, he took another cup of wine in his hands. Then he said,
"This is my blood. It is poured out for you, and with it God makes his new agreement. The one who will betray me is here at the table with me. The Son of Man will die in the way that has been decided for him, but it will be terrible for the one who betrays him."
Then the apostles started arguing about who would ever do such a thing. The apostles got into an argument about which one of them was the greatest. So Jesus told them,
"Foreign kings order their people around, and powerful rulers call themselves everyone's friends. But don't be like them. The most important one of you should be like the least important, and your leader should be like a servant. Who do people think is the greatest? A person who is served or one who serves? Isn't it the one who is served? But I have been with you as a servant, You have stayed with me in all my troubles, so I will give you the right to rule as kings, just as my Father has given me the right to rule as a king. You will eat and drink with me in my kingdom, and you will each sit on a throne to judge the 12 tribes of Israel.
Jesus said,
Simon, listen to me. Satan has demanded the right to test each one of you as a farmer does when he separates wheat from the husks. But Simon, I have prayed that your faith will be strong, and when you have come back to me, help the others.
Peter said,
Lord, I'm ready to go with you to jail and even to die with you.
Jesus replied,
Peter, I tell you that before a rooster crows tomorrow morning, you will say 3 times that you don't know me.
Jesus asked his disciples,
When I sent you out without a money bag or a traveling bag or sandals, did you need anything?
No, they answered. Jesus told them,
But now, if you have a money bag, take it with you. Also take a traveling bag, and if you don't have a sword, sell some of your clothes and buy one. Do this because the scriptures say, he was considered a criminal. This was written about me, and it will soon come true.
The disciples said,
Lord, here are 2 swords.
Enough of that.
Jesus replied. Jesus went out to the Mount of Olives, as he often did, and his disciples went with him. When they got there, he told them,
Pray that you will not be tested.
Jesus walked on a little way before he kneeled down and prayed.
Father, if you will, please don't make me suffer by having me drink from this cup. But do what you want and not what I want.
Then an angel from heaven came to help him. Jesus was in great pain and prayed so sincerely that his sweat fell to the ground like drops of blood. Jesus got up from praying and went over to his disciples. They were asleep and worn out from being so sad. He said to them,
Why are you asleep? Wake up and pray that you will not be tested.
While Jesus was still speaking, a crowd came up. It was led by Judas, one of the 12 apostles. He went over to Jesus and greeted him with a kiss. Jesus asked Judas,
Are you betraying the Son of Man with a kiss?
When Jesus' disciples saw what was about to happen, they asked,
Lord, should we attack them with a sword?
One of the disciples even struck at the high priest's servant with his sword and cut off the servant's right ear.
Enough of that,
Jesus said. Then he touched the servant's ear and healed it. Jesus spoke to the chief priests, the temple police, and the leaders who had come to arrest him. He said,
Why do you come out with swords and clubs and treat me like a criminal? I was with you every day in the temple, and you didn't arrest me. But this is your time, and darkness is in control.
Jesus was arrested and led away to the house of the high priest, while Peter followed at a distance. Some people built a fire in the middle of the courtyard and were sitting around it. Peter sat there with them, and a servant girl saw him. Then, after she had looked at him carefully, she said,
This man was with Jesus.
Peter said,
Woman, I don't even know that man.
A little later, someone else saw Peter and said,
You surely are one of them.
No, I'm not,
Peter replied. About an hour later, another man insisted,
This man must have been with Jesus. They both come from Galilee.
Peter replied,
I don't know what you are talking about.
Right then, while Peter was still speaking, a rooster crowed. The Lord turned and looked at Peter, and Peter remembered that the Lord had said,
Before a rooster crows tomorrow morning, you will say 3 times that you don't know me.
Then Peter went out and cried hard. The men who were guarding Jesus made fun of him and beat him. They put a blindfold on him and said,
Tell us, who struck you?
They kept on insulting Jesus in many other ways. At daybreak, the nation's leaders, the chief priests, and the teachers of the law of Moses got together and brought Jesus before their council. They said,
Tell us, are you the Messiah?
Jesus replied,
If I said so, you wouldn't believe me. And if I asked you a question, you wouldn't answer. But from now on, the Son of Man will be seated at the right side of God all-powerful.
Then they asked,
Are you the Son of God?
Jesus answered.
You say I am.
They replied,
Why do we need more witnesses? He said it himself.
Luke 23. Everyone in the council got up and led Jesus off to Pilate. They started accusing him and said,
We caught this man trying to get our people to riot and to stop paying taxes to the emperor. He also claims that he is the Messiah, our king.
Pilate asked Jesus,
Are you the King of the Jews?
Those are your words.
Jesus answered. Pilate told the chief priests and the crowd,
I don't find him guilty of anything.
But they all kept on saying,
He has been teaching and causing trouble all over Judea. He started in Galilee and has now come all the way here.
When Pilate heard this, he asked,
Is this man from Galilee?
After Pilate learned that Jesus came from the region ruled by Herod, he sent him to Herod, who was in Jerusalem at that time. For a long time, Herod had wanted to see Jesus and was very happy because he finally had this chance. He had heard many things about Jesus and hoped to see him work a miracle. Herod asked him a lot of questions, but Jesus did not answer. Then the chief priests and the teachers of the law of Moses stood up and accused him of all kinds of bad things. Herod and his soldiers made fun of Jesus and insulted him. They put a fine robe on him and sent him back to Pilate. That same day, Herod and Pilate became friends, even though they had been enemies before this. Pilate called together the chief priests, the leaders, and the people. He told them,
You brought Jesus to me and said he was a troublemaker. But I have questioned him here in front of you, and I have not found him guilty of anything that you say he has done. Herod didn't find him guilty either and sent him back. This man doesn't deserve to be put to death. I will just have him beaten with a whip and set free.
But the whole crowd shouted,
Kill Jesus! Give us Barabbas!
Now Barabbas was in jail because he had started a riot in the city and had murdered someone. Pilate wanted to set Jesus free, so he spoke again to the crowds, but they kept shouting,
Nail him to a cross! Nail him to a cross!
Pilate spoke to them a third time.
But what crime has he done? I have not found him guilty of anything for which he should be put to death. I will have him beaten with a whip and set free.
The people kept on shouting as loud as they could for Jesus to be put to death. Finally, Pilate gave in. He freed the man who was in jail for rioting and murder, because he was the one the crowd wanted to be set free. Then Pilate handed Jesus over for them to do what they wanted with him. As Jesus was being led away, some soldiers grabbed hold of a man from Cyrene named Simon. He was coming in from the fields, but they put the cross on him and made him carry it behind Jesus. A large crowd was following Jesus, and in the crowd a lot of women were crying and weeping for him. Jesus turned to the women and said,
Women of Jerusalem, don't cry for me. Cry for yourselves and for your children. Someday people will say, women who never had children are really fortunate. At that time, everyone will say to the mountains, fall on us. They will say to the hills, hide us. If this can happen when the wood is green, what do you think will happen when it is dry?
2 criminals were led out to be put to death with Jesus. When the soldiers came to the place called the Skull, they nailed Jesus to a cross. They also nailed the 2 criminals to crosses, one on each side of Jesus. Jesus said,
Father, forgive these people. They don't know what they're doing.
While the crowd stood there watching Jesus, the soldiers gambled for his clothes. The leaders insulted him by saying,
He saved others. Now he should save himself if he really is God's chosen Messiah.
The soldiers made fun of Jesus and brought him some wine. They said,
If you are the King of the Jews, save yourself.
Above him was a sign that said, "This is the King of the Jews." One of the criminals hanging there also insulted Jesus by saying,
"Aren't you the Messiah? Save yourself and save us."
But the other criminal told the first one off.
"Don't you fear God? Aren't you getting the same punishment as this man? We got what was coming to us, but he didn't do anything wrong."
Then he said to Jesus,
"Remember me when you come into power."
Jesus replied,
"I promise that today you will be with me in paradise."
Around noon, the sky turned dark and stayed that way until the middle of the afternoon. The sun stopped shining, and the curtain in the temple split down the middle. Jesus shouted,
"Father, I put myself in your hands."
Then he died. When the Roman officer saw what had happened, he praised God and said,
Jesus must really have been a good man.
A crowd had gathered to see the terrible sight. After they saw it, they felt broken-hearted and went home. All of Jesus' close friends and the women who had come with him from Galilee stood at a distance and watched. There was a man named Joseph, who was from Arimathea in Judea. Joseph was a good and honest man, and he was eager for God's kingdom to come. He was also a member of the Jewish council, but he did not agree with what they had decided. Joseph went to Pilate and asked for Jesus' body. He took the body down from the cross and wrapped it in fine cloth. Then he put it in a tomb that had been cut out of solid rock and had never been used. It was Friday, and the Sabbath was about to begin. The women who had come with Jesus from Galilee followed Joseph and watched how Jesus' body was placed in the tomb. Then they went to prepare some sweet-smelling spices for his burial. But on the Sabbath they rested, as the law of Moses commands. Luke 24. Very early on Sunday morning, the women went to the tomb, carrying the spices that they had prepared. When they found the stone rolled away from the entrance, they went in. But they did not find the body of the Lord Jesus, and they did not know what to think. Suddenly, 2 men in shining white clothes stood beside them. The women were afraid and bowed to the ground. But the men said,
"Why are you looking in the place of the dead for someone who is alive? Jesus is not here. He has been raised from death. Remember that while he was still in Galilee, he told you, 'The Son of Man will be handed over to sinners who will nail him to a cross. But 3 days later he will rise to life.'"
Then they remembered what Jesus had said. Mary Magdalene, Joanna, Mary, the mother of James, and some other women were the ones who had gone to the tomb. When they returned, they told the 11 apostles and the others what had happened. The apostles thought it was all nonsense, and they would not believe. But Peter ran to the tomb, and when he stooped down and looked in, he saw only the burial clothes. Then he returned, wondering what had happened. That same day, 2 of Jesus' disciples were going to the village of Emmaus, which was about 7 miles from Jerusalem. As they were talking and thinking about what had happened, Jesus came near and started walking along beside them. But they did not know who he was. Jesus asked them,
"What were you talking about as you walked along?"
The 2 of them stood there looking sad and gloomy. Then the one named Cleopas asked Jesus,
"Are you the only person from Jerusalem who didn't know what was happening there these last few days?"
"What do you mean?"
Jesus asked. They answered,
"Those things that happened to Jesus from Nazareth. By what he did and said, he showed that he was a powerful prophet who pleased God and all the people. Then the chief priests and our leaders had him arrested and sentenced to die on a cross. We had hoped that he would be the one to set Israel free, but it has already been 3 days since all this happened."
"Some women in our group surprised us. They had gone to the tomb early in the morning, but did not find the body of Jesus. They came back, saying that they had seen a vision of angels who told them that he is alive. Some men from our group went to the tomb and found it just as the women had said, but they didn't see Jesus either.
Then Jesus asked the 2 disciples,
"Why can't you understand? How can you be so slow to believe all that the prophets said? Didn't you know that the Messiah would have to suffer before he was given his glory?"
Jesus then explained everything written about himself in the scriptures, beginning with the law of Moses and the books of the prophets. When the 2 of them came near the village where they were going, Jesus seemed to be going farther. They begged him,
"Stay with us. It's already late and the sun is going down."
So Jesus went into the house to stay with them. After Jesus sat down to eat, he took some bread. He blessed it and broke it. Then he gave it to them. At once they knew who he was, but he disappeared. They said to each other,
"When he talked with us along the road and explained the scriptures to us, didn't it warm our hearts?"
So they got right up and returned to Jerusalem. The 2 disciples found the 11 apostles and the others gathered together, and they learned from the group that the Lord was really alive and had appeared to Peter. Then the disciples from Emmaus told what happened on the road and how they knew he was the Lord when he broke the bread. While Jesus' disciples were talking about what had happened, Jesus appeared to them and said,
"May God give you peace."
They were frightened and terrified because they thought they were seeing a ghost. But Jesus said,
"Why are you so frightened? Why do you doubt? Look at my hands and my feet and see who I am. Touch me and find out for yourselves. Ghosts don't have flesh and bones, as you see I have."
After Jesus said this, he showed them his hands and his feet. The disciples were so glad and amazed that they could not believe it. Jesus then asked them,
"Do you have something to eat?"
They gave him a piece of baked fish. He took it and ate it as they watched. Jesus said to them,
"While I was still with you, I told you that everything written about me in the law of Moses, the books of the prophets, and in the Psalms had to happen."
Then he helped them understand the scriptures. He told them,
"The scriptures say that the Messiah must suffer. Then 3 days later he will rise from death. They also say that all people of every nation must be told in my name to turn to God in order to be forgiven. So beginning in Jerusalem, you must tell everything that has happened. I will send you the one my Father has promised, but you must stay in the city until you are given power from heaven."
Jesus led his disciples out to Bethany, where he raised his hands and blessed them. As he was doing this, he left and was taken up to heaven. After his disciples had worshipped him, they returned to Jerusalem and were very happy. They spent their time in the temple, praising God.